this is the best guide for Blackwing Lair ever made, and no, it is not a guide I made this time. Take a look at this, okay? This is a little weird. Today, out of nowhere, this guy, Element39, made a post on Reddit. He posted this thing. I got tired of reading outdated and inaccurate SoD BWL guides, so I made my own, and he posted a GitHub repository. Now, I do not know who Element39 is. He made a post speaking in behalf of Questy. I do not know if he works at Questy. I couldn't find him in the list of developers. It's quite a mystery who this person is, but if he ever shows up and you want to plug something, I'll plug whatever you need to plug, bro. This is a great help to the community. I want to see more stuff like this. But essentially, he made a self-updating Blackwing Lair guide. It is actually very well detailed, and of course I'm gonna be linking it in the description so you can actually take a look at this. And please give the guy an upvote, he really deserves it. But he is effectively explaining the little mechanics that got me so confused during this whole tier. As you guys may found yourself in the same situation, I did not play Season of Mastery. And as somebody that didn't play Season of Mastery, I simply do not quite understand the mechanics. Because yes, I could have gone to Warcraft Tavern, read up on the mechanics and made up a 20-minute guide on Blackwing Lair. That would have been really easy, but I do not quite understand the strats because I didn't play Season of Mastery, and we got Season of Mastery mechanics plus the new mechanics now, of course. So I figured I was not the right guy to make a guide on Blackwing Lair. However, I still want to help you guys out with the mechanics here because I will be reading this along you. I'm gonna take a look at the mechanics that really bother me from Blackwing Lair, the ones that I cannot figure out, and this is gonna be a really interesting thing right here. There is a quick explanation of the affixes and how the loot works. Essentially, there is 3 ways you can get extra loot here. If you got the bonus, it's a different bonus every week. If you got the bonus affix, the first week it was the blue affix, then there is also another chest that's gonna give you more items depending on how many affixes you did, and there is a third chest that only spawns if you got 3 affixes. So of course the best way to get all the affixes is you gotta get 3 affixes, including the one with the bonus that week. Hopefully that clears up the confusion. I will not go over every single affix, I don't think that's necessary. They are rather simple, you can read about them if you like, they are right here. What I will do is tell you which are the easiest and which are the hardest, because that way you can make an informed decision on what affixes you can take. In my opinion, blue affix is the easiest. There is only one fight where you gotta change your strategy to deal with this affix, and everything else is the same. It is super easy, all you gotta do is stack up. The next easiest is gonna be the bronze one, because they kinda nerfed it from the PTR, it doesn't slow you as much, it's very hard to die to that. And the third easiest, in my opinion, is the green one, all you gotta do is move out of the poison. The red one is a dot that is kinda hard to deal with if you do not have a lot of healers, so I think it is one that you wanna avoid unless it is the bonus one. And the black one gives you new mechanics on every single fight, so it is definitely the hardest. Not necessarily because it is hard, but because you gotta memorize every single boss again, basically, so that's stupid. So yes, assuming you don't have a red or black bonus affix that week, I would go blue, green and bronze every single time. That's the way I would do it. There is a really neat, and you can actually tell how hard a boss is by how long the article is, right? Like Razorgore is barely a page. This is all of Razorgore's base mechanics. This is something really cool. They explain the black affix. Every single fight has an extra mechanic if you do the black affix, just like in Cataclysm with Blackwing Descent. It makes sense, right? It's Nefarian again. But he also got a little section for that. Belstras is definitely something that was not very intuitive for me and something that I messed up. I think I murdered my raid twice doing Belstras, so this came in really handy, and looking at this article actually changed my entire view on how to do the fight, and this is definitely what I'm gonna do next week. We were doing the old strategy from vanilla of doing the melee on one side and the casters on the other, and in some you gotta do what this diagram shows, and the explanation is actually really solid. Another thing that changed is that Burning Adrenaline will always go to the main tank now. That's what threw us off. Burning Adrenaline is a dot that you eventually die from, but it also gives you a quadrillion damage, so if you're the tank and you get Burning Adrenaline first, you're gonna hold aggro no problem. That's also something that confused us because, I don't know, in the PTR I didn't even know that this was going on and we killed it, honestly. But in here it was a lot harder because, of course, in the PTR you got all the boons and you got consumables and the best gear in the game, so that makes it a lot easier to mess up. Now here it actually matters to do it right. Now the mistake that I killed the raid over and over from is that you cannot be in front of Belstras, right? If Belstras goes in front of the raid, he will breed all the raid and kill them. We were doing the old strategy to prevent the chaining cleaves, because if one guy gets cleaved, people next to him get cleaved, so if you got the melees close to the casters, that can go very bad very fast. But in SoD, you actually gotta keep all the melee on the same side as the casters, and the off tank has to be on the opposite side. You can see this little drawing right here, like that's the off tank that picks it up, because unless you got the DPS to one face it, and we could one face it with boons, so that's also something to keep in mind. This is one of the few fights where booning for it makes it a lot easier, the mechanics itself. Most of the mechanics in Blackwing Lair do not get a lot easier from unbooning, but this one really does. But essentially, the tank will eventually die to the dot that he gets, and he explodes, okay? When you get the dot and you die, you explode and kill everybody around you. And that makes it very hard, because even if you're second on threat, which I was second on threat, if I am where the melees are, and I pull threat because the tank died, I will kill all the melee. But on the other hand, and this is how I killed the raid so many times, if I try to be at the front just as he dies, he will explode and I will die too. So I cannot be in the front to make him not move. But if you follow this diagram, and everybody's on one side and the off tank is in the other side, when the main tank dies, I will be far enough that I will not die from his explosion, but Belstras is gonna face me instead of the raid. He might tail swipe some people, that's fine. It's not wipe. If you get tail swiped once, it's not gonna be a huge problem, just run back in. But that way, I can just turn him and then run back to where the other tank was and just keep going. If your DPS is not very good, you can even time it in a way that the third guy on threat can also take the position of the off tank and do this indefinitely as many times as you need. So Belstras done properly, which we weren't doing, is not much of a DPS check, even though it is a DPS check intended, of course. So yeah, this strategy is different to what we used to do back in the day, and it is so much easier. So this is the thing that this guide really helped me about, and I really recommend, if you didn't do Season of Mastery, that you really check out this guide, once again in the description, because there is a lot of little corrections of what we've been doing for Classic that you have to do different now. But very well, let's go over some of the other differences we gotta talk about. Broodlord Lashlayer, that's the guy that's after the Depression Chamber. In the PTR he was a complete joke, but now for the live server they buffed them. It is still not too hard, but you gotta actually do it properly. We didn't do it properly the first time in the PTR, it was so easy, we just killed them. I will actually show you footage of my raid, because we figured out a good way to do it, so I might as well. First of all, get a healer soulstoned, get as many people soulstoned as you can before you do that, because if you die here you gotta do the Depression Chamber again, and nobody wants to do that. By the way, Agrent, what the hell, you didn't put portals every time you wipe, like you gotta run for 10 minutes to the boss every time you wipe again. We've been over this. People complained in the PTR, and how hard is it? It's like 3 buttons, brother. I don't know. We need people to complain on Twitter again. I think they had it too good for too long. People have not complained on Twitter enough, and we don't get portals to go back to bosses. People complain in Sunken Temple, we get it for Molten Core, and we often are complaining because we think that they learned their lesson. And once again, no portals in Blackwing Lair because they hate us. I don't know, bro. I'm so freaking upset about that, for real. Be polite about it. Being rude doesn't help anybody. They are not gonna listen to you if you're rude, but yeah, if you can politely and nicely say, please Mr. Agrent, can you please put portals in Blackwing Lair, because it kinda sucks to wipe in that place. I would really appreciate that. Regardless, you gotta stand in this place. I think this is by far the best way to tank him, because those 2 pillars are gonna make it so he's gonna knock back the raid, but they are gonna get knocked back into the pillar behind them, and you, the tank, are gonna get knocked back, but you're gonna stay in the same position because of the wall. And that way the raid can be behind him the whole time. There is 0 chance for pulling accidentally, because they are all at a parallel angle to him, so they will just hit the wall instead of pulling something. You can pull aggro into the trash mobs if you're not careful. And after that, the only thing you gotta remember is that he's gonna Mortal Strike you, he's gonna do a lot of damage, but it is nothing that is impossible to manage. You just pop a defensive cooldown, you just leap through it, you gotta heal through it basically. Oh, he also drops aggro, so you need a second tank, but that's also pretty easy, because he only drops the threat of the first guy in threat. It's pretty easy to keep catching up. It is nothing groundbreaking. The thing is that nobody did it the intended way in Classic, because it was so easy, everybody just brute forced it. But now you gotta do it the intended way, and this is the intended way to do it. Firemaw, the next boss, is also one boss that was super easy on the PTR and kinda hard on the live server. We wiped on this guy twice, I believe. Our positioning for the raid was not very good, but I will try to show you the footage so you can kinda work it out. You gotta be right next to this pillar in the door when you pull him. Not quite close to the pillar enough so the healers can actually line of sight you, but as close as you can without line of sighting the healers. The range are gonna be on the other side of the door, and the melee are just gonna be behind them, just whacking him the whole time. Now, there is only 2 mechanics on this guy. Don't forget your Onyxia Cloak, by the way, the Onyxia Cloak or you die. You gotta get that one, but there is a new mechanic in some Unseasonal Discovery that really screwed us over, and it is the static charges. Everybody in the raid keeps getting charges, and they are at a different time as everybody else. That's something that's kind of curious. They don't all happen at once. And if you hit 10 stacks of this debuff, you explode and you do a chain lightning to people, and that does a lot of damage. So if you're a DPS or a healer, you gotta move away from everybody when you get 8 or 9 stacks and just wait until you get the 10th and then go back in, basically. The tank can get it too, and this is where it's kind of a challenge because there is no way to avoid it, right? What you're gonna do? Zone all the melee out for 10 seconds? That's not gonna work. So the melee will have to eat it, and the healers will have to heal through it. So one thing that I didn't prepare for at all, and I will be preparing from now on, you gotta get nature protection potions for the raid because this will help a ton, okay? This saves 1 rotation of the debuff. And the shamans gotta drop the nature resistance totem. I think there is a hunter aspect for it too, but I don't know if that's a good idea. But in the horde, you gotta drop the nature resistance totem. Thankfully, we got global wind fury now, so that's not a big problem because it is a wind totem. And the nature resistance totem is basically gonna make it so people take a lot less damage. You still gotta move out when you can, that's still a problem, but it will mitigate the lightning mechanic a lot. The other mechanic he got is that he's gonna do a wing clip, a wing buffet, I think it's called actually. I don't know why they call it buffet, but I don't know, maybe you can eat wings like chicken wings. And it drops aggro, so you need a second tank to go pick it up. And it matches another mechanic. You're basically gonna be taking flame buffet constantly. This one doesn't do AoE damage, but it will stack up until you get like a lot of them and you cannot keep going because you're gonna die to the dot. It's a dot that ramps up. So the wing buffet is a perfect opportunity. Right after it happens, the other tank picks it up from you, they stand in the same spot, and the other tank just goes out of line of sight and they drop the stacks. Now, if you're a DPS or a healer, that is also a problem, guys, because it affects everybody in line of sight of Firemaw. Fire resistance helps, but if you got more than 7 stacks or something, you gotta move out, basically. If you're a tank, I think the best way to do it is still the same of just tanking him until you get the wing buffet, and then the other tank picks it up. It just matches about 8 stacks in time-wise every time. It is doable. You can do it earlier if you want. It's annoying and it doesn't achieve much. But I just simply hate this kind of mechanic where like all it takes is one guy to do it wrong and everybody dies. That's basically the lightning mechanic, and I hate it. And you are gonna see that people eventually, as they get more gear, especially if they get nature protection potions and nature resistance totems, you're gonna see people brute forcing it. You're gonna see people eating the damage every single time, but you're not supposed to. You still gotta move out. You're just griefing your raid if you stay in. But yes, I wanted to clarify that new mechanic too. Oh, look at that. There is even a really nice diagram to show you the positioning. Now, the reason that I wanted to make this video is because this guy pretty much fixed my problems with Ebonroc. We were doing it wrong in the PTR and here. If you guys remember on the PTR, we killed it with one guy alive. That was hilarious. Now, we were doing it wrong. We were having one tank on one boss and one tank on the other, and you basically gotta swap over the other boss because both the bosses got a separate debuff that it stacks over time if you're near them, and it eventually kills you, so you gotta move from one boss to the other. 4 stacks is the best timing to go and swap. Now, we were doing the old strategy from Classic, where you just take like a healer and a hunter to tranquilize shot because you gotta trank the bosses, they enrage, and they go with one tank and the rest of the raid goes to one boss and the raid just follows that other tank. Now, that was wrong. That was a terrible idea, and we wiped on the boon pool because of it. Why? Because of the blue affix, okay? You are most likely going to have the blue affix because it's the easiest affix. Sadly, the way the blue affix works is you need people to stack on the blue guy or everybody dies. You gotta soak the damage. So that makes the whole thing a lot more complicated. So what you gotta do now is get half the healers and half the DPSers on one group, and they gotta follow one tank, and then you gotta get the other half of the healers and the other half of the DPSers, make sure you got a hunter on each side, and they gotta follow the other tank. So that way, you got enough people to soak the blue affix if it explodes. And the tanks gotta get as far away from each other as possible with Flamegor and Ebonroc, and after you get 4 stacks, the tanks gotta swap targets. One tank has to go and taunt the other boss, and the other tank goes and taunts the other boss, and they just move away from each other and go back to the opposite positions again, as far as possible, so the groups do not get the 2 debuffs at the same time, because that's something that can happen. So yeah, the affix killed us on the boon pool, that really screwed us. Another thing you gotta remember, guys, do not stand in front of the boss. You gotta be dead behind them, or you are gonna die because he clips, both of them. But yes, that was the mistake that kept killing us, and hopefully it's not gonna happen now, haha. That's another adjustment you gotta do from Classic to SoD. Now, I will not really go over Chromaggus too much, because Chromaggus is still a loot piñata. He puts a debuff on you that CCs you, and you gotta use Hourglass Sand to remove the debuff, and basically you gotta trank him and he dies. That's pretty much it. He barely does any damage, he's not a threat at all. You also gotta dispel poisons and curses, and that's pretty much it. Just make sure he doesn't breathe on the raid and you're done. I am not concerned about Chromaggus at all. You can see the positioning right here. Really cool stuff right here. The diagrams are top notch. I will steal this format actually. It looks so good. I think he manually drew the room layout for this. That's an insane amount of effort. And finally, Nefarian. Nefarian is not nearly as hard as the other guys. In the PTR, he took us a couple tries, granted, but we had like low DPS on that fight. The one thing that kinda screws you is if you got a druid tank or a warrior tank, it is very hard to survive it. You gotta learn your class calls. I made a different guide on the class calls. That video is kinda old. It will take me 20 minutes to explain all of them. But essentially, the warrior class call and the druid class call is that you are out of stance and you take a lot of damage, so you can't really tank him well. If you got a non-druid or non-warrior tank in the raid, you can have that guy pick it up, and that's pretty much it. But otherwise, you're gonna have to gamble, because here's the big problem. The class call for the warrior makes you berserker stance, so you can't shield wall. All you got on your disposal is last stand, and you take 30% extra damage on top of that. One tip I can give you is that you should blow your shield wall early. You can predict when a class call is gonna come out, but you cannot predict which class is gonna be, so you cannot really expect the warrior one to come out, so because otherwise you could just shield wall preemptively and deal with that mechanic just fine. But you gotta remember, you only got last stand and rallying cry as a defensive cooldown, and you're gonna have to cycle through both of them if you got the class call. So you are encouraged to blow your shield wall earlier. So when you are, I don't know, mid-fight and you see a class call coming up and you're not so sure that you're gonna survive it, just blow a shield wall right before it, and maybe you get the warrior one. That's the best case scenario, where you blow your shield wall right before the class call comes out, and then the class call is the warrior one, and you get basically a free survival through it. Especially if the fight is about to be over and you think like you only got 1 or 2 class calls left, you can drop it then. But you definitely gotta save your last stand and your rallying cry for whenever you do get the warrior last call, because that's the only way you can survive it. You need defensive stance to do shield wall, that's the problem, and you cannot be in defensive stance. In the Alliance, I see Paladins do a Blessing of Protection on the warrior. Hopefully the other tank is second on threat and he just picks it up. That's also something you can do. You can even Petri Flask. I think that's the reason that they made it, so you cannot right click the Petri Flask anymore. But that's also another way to not taunt the opposite of taunting, just losing aggro. Like, what is the opposite of a taunt? A compliment? That's some way you can drop aggro so the other tank can pick it up during that class call and then go back. But yes, otherwise the fight is pretty similar. The ads just die. Also, we got a little bit of an update on the Suzerain quest. Now that we're talking about Nefarian, I might as well tell you. You can use the Dragon Tooth Blade to skin him after he gets below 20%, but apparently the cast is interrupted by taking damage, so you cannot be tanking him while you do it, which is really stupid because it's a tank class quest item and you cannot tank him during the 20% last phase, so you need the other tank to pick it up. It's so stupid. It is so stupid. But I have seen logs of people doing it, so you can just skin him. You also apparently gotta be behind them to skin him. That's something we also didn't know. And there is still a decent chance that it's gonna bug out again, because they said they fixed it, it's not fixed. So that's a word of caution for the warriors out there. And of course, after you get the scale, you gotta eat 1 Shadow Flame, so you gotta be in front of him and you get the Shadow Flame immediately. There is no placing it or anything, you just gotta take one yourself. Super easy to do if you're the tank. But yes, I sure do hope that they fix this stupid quest, so I'm gonna do Nefarian tonight, and there is a really non-zero chance that it's gonna bug out and I'm not gonna get my stupid shield, and that sucks. I will link you this guide on the description. I will also put it on the Discord. I'm gonna pin it because it is amazing. I am so glad we got all these explanations right here, and you should definitely give it a good read because it has everything. Subscribe, join the Discord, and thank you for watching.